What would you do if you were humiliated, belittled, and stripped of your dignity, all because of the color of your skin? What if those in power believed they could silence you, erase you, and make you disappear, simply because they assumed no one would fight back? Meet Naomi Carter, a brilliant, accomplished black woman who has spent her entire life proving people wrong. She's no stranger to double standards, the hushed whispers, the condescending stares. She knows the feeling of walking into a space where people instantly decide she doesn't belong. She has worked twice as hard, fought twice as long, only to receive half the respect. But today, they crossed the line. What should have been a routine flight turned into something else entirely. Naomi had purchased a first-class ticket, expecting nothing more than a peaceful journey. Instead, she was met with blatant discrimination, led by Victoria Langley, the lead flight attendant, a woman who believed that power meant control, and control meant crushing those beneath her. The moment Naomi stepped onto the plane, Victoria made up her mind. This woman didn't belong. With every smug smirk, every whispered insult, every carefully orchestrated humiliation, Victoria made sure Naomi knew it. But what Victoria didn't know, Naomi wasn't just any passenger, and the payback that was coming, it was going to be legendary. What happens when the person you tried to break turns out to be the one who can destroy you? What does it look like when those who think they are untouchable finally face the consequences of their actions? If you were in Naomi's shoes, what would you do? Where are you watching from? Comment your city or country below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful justice moments, shocking plot twists, and stories that prove karma is very real. Naomi Carter walked through the bustling airport terminal, her heels clicking against the polished floor. Around her, the world moved in a synchronized rush. Businessmen checking their watches, families huddled together, excited children pressing their faces against the massive glass windows, pointing at planes. But Naomi wasn't like them. She moved with quiet confidence, her boarding pass tucked neatly into her sleek leather handbag. Today was supposed to be special. After years of relentless hard work, she had finally earned this moment. A first-class ticket wasn't just a luxury, it was a testament to her achievements. As she approached the boarding gate, the line for first-class passengers was surprisingly short. She stepped forward, feeling the familiar weight of judgmental glances. She had seen them before. The subtle double takes, the quick, assessing looks that scanned her designer outfit, searching for a reason why she didn't belong. She ignored them. The gate attendant checked her boarding pass with a polite nod. "Enjoy your flight, Miss Carter." Naomi smiled, stepping forward. But as she reached the entrance of the plane, she encountered Victoria Langley. Victoria, a woman in her early 40s, stood with rigid professionalism, her posture stiff with authority. Her uniform was crisp, her blonde hair pulled into a severe bun, and her sharp gray eyes locked onto Naomi like a hawk spotting prey. Naomi extended her ticket, expecting the usual routine check. Instead, Victoria's lips curled into a smirk. Crossing her arms, she tilted her head. "Are you lost?" she asked, her voice dripping with condescension. Naomi blinked, momentarily thrown off. "Excuse me?" Victoria's smirk widened. "This is the first-class entrance," she said slowly, as if explaining something to a child. "Economy boarding is through the other door." Naomi inhaled sharply, steadying herself. She had dealt with this before, the polite skepticism, the unspoken disbelief. "I know," she replied evenly. Lifting her boarding pass, she held it up for Victoria to see. "This is my seat." Victoria didn't move to take the ticket. Instead, she tilted her head, feigning curiosity. "Oh, you have a first-class ticket?" Her tone suggested that the very idea was amusing. Naomi's grip on the ticket tightened. "Yes, I do." Victoria chuckled under her breath, shaking her head slightly. "Huh? That's unexpected." She finally took the ticket, her manicured nails grazing the paper as she glanced at it. For a moment, her expression flickered with something. Annoyance? Disbelief? Before she forced a polite smile. "Well, let's just make sure this isn't a mistake." The pause dragged on too long. It was deliberate. Naomi knew it. Behind her, the first-class passengers began shifting impatiently. A few sighed audibly. Victoria made a show of examining the ticket as if deciphering an ancient text. Naomi's jaw tensed. This was just the beginning. Victoria held the boarding pass between her fingers, flipping it over as if it required deep analysis. Her lips pursed, her brows furrowed, as though deciphering a document far too complex for a simple glance. Naomi kept her posture straight, her face unreadable, but inside, a slow burn had begun. The moment stretched. Passengers behind her shuffled, shifting their weight impatiently. A few sighed, their irritation growing. Not at Victoria for the unnecessary delay, but at Naomi for being the cause of it. Naomi exhaled through her nose, steadying herself. "Is there an issue?" she asked, her voice calm, controlled. Victoria finally let out a soft huff, handing the ticket back with a deliberate slowness. No, just surprised, that's all." She stepped aside, but not completely. She lingered. Then, just as Naomi moved past her, Victoria muttered under her breath, just loud enough for the words to reach her ears. "They really do let anyone into first class these days, don't they?" Naomi's steps faltered for half a second, her fingers curling slightly at her sides. But she didn't turn back. She wouldn't give Victoria the satisfaction. Instead, she took a slow breath and walked forward, shoulders squared, refusing to let the moment settle in her bones. Some passengers glanced up as she passed. Others deliberately looked away, pretending not to notice, unwilling to acknowledge what had just played out in front of them. Naomi reached her seat and sank into the plush cushion, adjusting her handbag with precise, controlled movements, as if rearranging the physical world could somehow erase the moment of humiliation she had just endured. She turned toward the window, inhaling slowly. This was supposed to be a celebration of success, a peaceful journey home. But now, it was clear. This flight would be anything but smooth. The luxury of the first-class seat was supposed to provide comfort, but Naomi felt none of it. Her body remained tense, fingers gripping the armrest, the ghost of Victoria's words clinging to her skin like a stain she couldn't scrub away. A hushed murmur rippled through the cabin. Not loud, not direct, but she could feel it. The sideways glances, the quiet judgment. Her breathing slowed. Inhale. Exhale. Keep your head up. She had fought too hard, worked too long, to let something like this shake her. But even as she steadied herself, a shadow loomed over her once again. She didn't need to look up. She knew exactly who it was. Victoria stood over her, arms crossed, an expression that was both smug and businesslike, like someone who had just found something out of place and was now obligated to fix it. "I'm sorry," she announced, her voice light but loud enough to carry across the cabin. "I need to verify your ticket again." Naomi's head snapped up. "Again?" she asked, her voice even, though heat coiled beneath the surface. Victoria let out an exaggerated sigh, rolling her eyes slightly, as if she were the one being inconvenienced. "We've had incidents in the past," she continued, shaking her head in mock sympathy. "Passengers mistakenly taking first-class seats when they were actually meant for economy. I just need to be absolutely sure before we take off." Naomi's stomach clenched. She had already shown her ticket twice, and yet, here she was, being treated like a fraud. The words weren't direct, but the message was clear. "You don't belong here." The air shifted. First-class passengers who had previously been indifferent were now paying attention. A few turned slightly in their seats, pretending to be preoccupied with their phones, but still listening. Others, less subtle, glanced over with mild curiosity, waiting to see how this would play out. Naomi hesitated only for a second before reaching into her bag, pulling out her boarding pass once more. Her hands were steady, but she could feel the slow creep of heat rising up her neck. "Don't react. Don't let them see they got to you." Victoria plucked the ticket from her hands, holding it between two fingers like something questionable. She tilted it toward the cabin lights, flipping it over unnecessarily, her lips pursed in deep, unnecessary concentration. The process dragged on. Too long. A woman in the row ahead leaned toward her companion, whispering something. A soft chuckle followed. Across the aisle, a man adjusted his tie and cleared his throat, his expression neutral, but his posture tense. The weight of their gazes pressed against Naomi's skin. She remained still. Perfectly still. She swallowed the lump rising in her throat. This wasn't new. It had happened before, in different forms. Doubt, condescension, the polite insistence that there must be some mistake. But this was different. This was public. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Victoria let out a long, exaggerated sigh and handed the ticket back. "Fine," she said, the reluctance in her voice unmistakable. "It looks like you're in the right place, after all." Naomi took the ticket, resisting the urge to snatch it from her hands. She held Victoria's gaze for half a second. "I told you that already." Victoria smirked. "Oh, no need to get defensive, dear. I was just doing my job." The false politeness was sharper than any direct insult. Then, just as Naomi thought it was finally over, Victoria took a step closer, lowering her voice just enough to make the words feel personal, but still loud enough to be overheard. "I do hope you'll find our menu options acceptable," she mused, her tone dripping with fake concern. "Some of our selections are a bit elevated." A low chuckle came from somewhere behind them. Naomi's entire body burned, not from the words themselves, but from the sheer audacity of them. Victoria's fingers grazed the edge of the seat before she finally stepped away, her condescending smile still in place. The tension in the cabin had settled into a quiet rhythm. But Naomi knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. Naomi took the ticket, her fingers steady despite the urge to snatch it away. "I told you that already." Victoria smirked, her expression dripping with false politeness. "Oh, no need to get defensive, dear. I was just doing my job." The sweetness in her tone was sharper than any direct insult. Naomi exhaled, preparing to put the moment behind her. But just as she thought it was over, Victoria turned back. That smirk widened. Without warning, she slapped a hand down on Naomi's shoulder, hard. The sudden impact sent a jolt through Naomi's body. Her muscles tensed as Victoria leaned in, lowering her voice just enough to make it feel personal, but still loud enough for others to hear. "Oh, almost forgot," she said, feigning concern. "Do you need help with the menu? Some of our selections might be a bit elevated." A low chuckle rippled from somewhere behind them. Naomi's entire body burned, not from the touch itself, but from the sheer audacity of it. Victoria's fingers dug in slightly before pulling away, her condescending smile still in place. The cabin had settled into a quiet rhythm, but Naomi could feel the tension lingering in the air. Every so often, she caught passengers stealing quick glances before looking away, pretending not to have noticed. Their silence was suffocating, complicit. Naomi swallowed hard, forcing herself not to let Victoria's words echo in her mind. But before she could fully regain her composure, the shadow returned. Victoria was back. She stood just a little too close, arms crossed, her lips curling into a smirk. "You know," she mused, her voice soft but edged with venom, "it's funny." She tilted her head slightly, her sharp gaze flicking over Naomi's outfit before meeting her eyes again. "Look around," Naomi stiffened. "Do you see anyone else here? Like you?" Her breath hitched. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The question wasn't meant for an actual response. It was a knife, twisting beneath the surface. Victoria let the silence stretch before sighing dramatically. "That's what I thought." She gave a small, almost pitying shake of her head. "I knew something was off the moment you walked in." Naomi's fingers curled into fists in her lap, her nails pressing into her palms. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to say something, to push back, to fight. But she knew it wouldn't matter. Nothing she said would change the way Victoria saw her. Or the way they all saw her. A tight, nauseating feeling settled in her stomach as Victoria finally stepped back, looking satisfied. "Well," she mused, her voice coated in fake sweetness. "If you insist on staying, I should at least make sure you're comfortable." Naomi inhaled sharply, releasing her fists. She needed something, anything, to ground herself. "I'd like some water." Her voice was steady. Victoria blinked, then let out a small, amused laugh. "Oh?" She placed a hand on her hip, then turned slightly toward another flight attendant, a younger woman who had been standing nearby, observing the entire interaction in uneasy silence. "Did you hear that, Olivia?" Victoria smirked, turning back to Naomi. "She wants water." Olivia hesitated, shifting her weight slightly. She looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. Naomi's patience thinned. "Yes, just water." Victoria tapped a manicured finger against her chin, pretending to think. You know, we usually offer drinks to first-class passengers." Her eyes gleamed with amusement. "Are you sure you wouldn't prefer to, I don't know, bring your own?" A soft chuckle came from somewhere behind Naomi. Someone shifted in their seat, whispered something just low enough that she couldn't hear. The heat of embarrassment crawled up Naomi's neck, but she refused to let it show. "I'd like my water. Now." Victoria's fake smile didn't waver, but something in her expression darkened. "Oh, of course." She turned and walked away. Naomi watched her go, her jaw locked tight. She waited. 1 minute. 2. 5. The hum of the plane, the clinking of glasses, the soft chatter of other passengers being served, it all filled the cabin. But no water arrived. A flight attendant passed by, and Naomi took the opportunity. "Excuse me," she said, her tone polite but firm. "I asked for water a while ago." The attendant hesitated. Then, almost instinctively, her eyes flicked toward the galley. Naomi followed her gaze. There, standing by the beverage cart, laughing softly with another crew member, was Victoria. She wasn't busy. She hadn't forgotten. And in that moment, the realization hit like a slap. Victoria wasn't ignoring her. She was punishing her. Naomi inhaled slowly, forcing the frustration down. She was trapped in a silent battle, one she had no choice but to endure. She refused to let Victoria break her. But the slow burn of humiliation was relentless. Every passing moment without a simple glass of water was another reminder. She wasn't welcome here. The plane hadn't even taken off, yet she already felt cornered. Every move she made seemed to make things worse. Her eyes flicked toward the galley. Victoria was still there, chatting animatedly with another crew member, her laughter light and unbothered. She wasn't busy. She hadn't forgotten. This was deliberate. Calculated. A power play. Naomi inhaled deeply, bracing herself. She would not be dismissed. Summoning every ounce of composure, she rose to her feet. Conversations around her quieted. A few heads turned, sensing the tension before a single word was spoken. She stepped forward, toward the galley, toward Victoria. She was going to demand what she was owed. But before she could open her mouth, Victoria spun around, her eyes locking onto Naomi with something cold and triumphant. "Oh no." Her voice carried effortlessly through the cabin. "Not again." A murmur rippled through the passengers. A few exchanged confused glances. Others smirked, already assuming the worst. Naomi stiffened. "Excuse me?" Victoria let out a dramatic sigh, shaking her head as if dealing with yet another inconvenience. "It happens more than you'd think," she said, turning slightly so the entire first-class section could hear. "People sneaking in, trying to upgrade themselves." She chuckled, as if amused by the audacity of it all. "They think they can just blend in." A man in a tailored suit let out a scoff. 2 rows ahead, a woman whispered something to her companion, shaking her head in disapproval. Naomi's breath caught in her throat. Victoria smiled sweetly at her, then at the watching passengers. "Don't worry, everyone. I'll handle this." Before Naomi could react, Victoria grabbed her wrist. It wasn't a gentle touch. It wasn't professional. It was an assertion of control, a blatant display of power. Victoria's nails dug into Naomi's skin as she yanked her forward, forcing her off balance. Naomi stumbled. Her knee knocked against the edge of a seat. A muffled laugh came from somewhere in the cabin. Her pulse roared in her ears. A hot flush of anger and disbelief surged through her, but she clenched her jaw, forcing herself to remain still. "Let go." Her voice was low, controlled. Victoria tightened her grip. "I need you to come with me." Naomi's fingers curled into fists. "I'm not going anywhere. This is my seat." Victoria leaned in slightly, her voice dropping just for Naomi to hear. "Not for long." Then louder. "We'll sort this out with security." A hush fell over the cabin. Passengers openly stared now. A few had their phones out. Whether they were texting or filming, Naomi couldn't tell. Her heart pounded. She wanted to fight back, to rip her arm away, to demand the respect she had earned. But she could already hear the unspoken narrative forming in their minds. She must have done something. They wouldn't treat her like this for no reason. If she really belonged here, she wouldn't be making a scene. She knew how this worked. If she resisted, even for a second, she wouldn't just be humiliated. She'd be the problem. So she did the only thing she could. She let Victoria drag her forward. Her footsteps were slow, controlled, as if she was the one allowing this to happen. Naomi kept her head high, but every step forward felt like sinking deeper into quicksand. Victoria didn't look angry, no. She looked satisfied. She had made Naomi a spectacle. And now she was going to finish the show. Victoria reached for the small black radio clipped to her uniform. With exaggerated patience, she pressed the button. "Security. This is Victoria Langley in first class," she said sweetly, as if she were requesting extra napkins instead of calling for Naomi's public humiliation. "I have a situation here." Naomi's stomach clenched. A passenger is refusing to comply with seating arrangements. Victoria's voice dripped with practiced professionalism. "I believe an escort is necessary." The words sliced through the cabin like a cold wind. Near the window, a man exhaled sharply, shaking his head. Across the aisle, a woman muttered, "Typical." Someone snickered behind her. Naomi's pulse thundered in her ears. She had done nothing wrong. Yet the way people reacted, their assumptions, their instant acceptance of Victoria's narrative, made her feel like she had. The way they looked at her now was different. Not just irritation. Confirmation. As if they had suspected all along that she didn't belong. And now? They had their proof. A crackle from Victoria's radio broke through the tension. Copy that. Security en route. Victoria clipped the radio back to her uniform. She turned to Naomi with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "They'll be here shortly," she said. Her voice carried a thinly veiled amusement. "I suggest you be cooperative. We wouldn't want this to be any more unpleasant than it needs to be." Victoria's voice dripped with mock sympathy, but the threat beneath it was unmistakable. Naomi inhaled sharply through her nose, her fingers tightening around the strap of her handbag. Every muscle in her body screamed at her to fight back, to demand justice. But she knew exactly what would happen if she did. She had seen it before. The moment she raised her voice, she would become the problem. Not Victoria. Not the people watching, their eyes filled with quiet amusement, treating her humiliation like in-flight entertainment. Her father's words echoed in her mind. Never let them see you break, so she didn't. Instead, she lifted her chin, exuding a calm she didn't feel. "Fine." Her voice was steady, despite the fire burning in her chest. "I'll wait." For the first time, Victoria hesitated. Just for a second. Irritation flickered across her face, quickly followed by something else, disappointment. She had expected a fight, she had wanted one. But Naomi's composure stole the victory from her hands. Still, Victoria wasn't finished. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper meant only for Naomi. "Remember this moment," she murmured, her breath sickly sweet. "Because it's proof this world isn't made for people like you." The words hit deeper than they should have. Not because Naomi believed them, but because Victoria did. Because everyone watching, everyone who stayed silent, probably did too. Her fingers dug into the soft leather of her bag, nails pressing into her palm. She wanted to scream. She wanted to wipe the smugness off Victoria's face. She wanted to tell every single person staring at her, pretending not to see, that they were complicit. She could already hear the outcome, already see the headlines in her mind. Unruly passenger disrupts first-class flight. Airline enforces strict policy to maintain luxury experience. No, she wouldn't give them that. A shift in the atmosphere. The first uniformed officer appeared at the entrance of the cabin, tall, broad-shouldered, his expression professional, unreadable. His eyes flicked from Victoria to Naomi. The entire first-class section fell into an eerie, expectant silence. A second officer followed, this time a woman. Her gaze was sharper, more assessing. The two exchanged a brief glance before stepping forward. The male officer spoke first. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us." The final nail in the coffin. Naomi forced herself to move, even as her body screamed against it. She adjusted the strap of her handbag. Back straight. Movements deliberate. If they were going to force her out, she would make sure she left with her dignity intact. But Victoria wasn't done. She let out an exaggerated sigh, rubbing her temples like this ordeal had been such a burden on her. "Thank you, officers," she said, her voice dripping with false relief. "I was beginning to worry we wouldn't get this resolved before takeoff. You know how some people just refuse to follow the rules." The message was clear. Some people. The passengers shifted. Some nodded subtly. Others muttered in agreement. A well-dressed man in a navy blazer leaned toward his companion, his voice just loud enough for Naomi to hear. "Unbelievable. You'd think people would know their place by now." Naomi's grip tightened around her bag. She stepped forward, keeping her pace steady, ignoring the way eyes followed her like she was some kind of spectacle. The whispers blurred together, an endless loop of judgment and dismissal. She should have just moved when they told her to. Always causing problems. Always making a scene. This is why first class should have stricter policies. Each word was a slap, but Naomi refused to react. The female officer placed a light hand on her arm, a silent but firm direction toward the exit. "This way, ma'am." Naomi clenched her jaw. She hated that word. Ma'am. It was supposed to be respectful, but right now it felt like nothing more than a command wrapped in courtesy. She moved past Victoria. The flight attendant stood with thinly veiled triumph, her hands clasped in front of her as if she had done something noble. Then, just as Naomi passed, Victoria leaned in, her voice so low only Naomi could hear. "See," she whispered, "it always ends the same way." Naomi's breath hitched, but she didn't stop walking. She wouldn't let Victoria see how deep the wound went. She wouldn't let any of them see. She reached the front of the cabin, past the first row of business class. A mother sat with her teenage son. The boy, no older than 15, watched Naomi with wide eyes, a flicker of something hesitant, almost conflicted. His mother, however, had no such uncertainty. She placed a firm hand on his arm and shook her head slightly. A silent message. Don't sympathize. Don't get involved. Naomi forced herself forward. She wouldn't break, not here, not in front of them, not ever. The teenage boy, no older than 15, watched Naomi with wide eyes, a flicker of something hesitant, almost conflicted. But his mother had no such uncertainty. She placed a firm hand on his arm and shook her head slightly. A silent message. Don't sympathize. Don't get involved. Naomi forced herself forward. The flight attendants at the front barely looked at her as the officers guided her down the jet bridge. The cool airport air hit her skin like a slap, but it did nothing to douse the fire burning in her chest. And then, a voice crackled over the radio. No need to remove the passenger from the flight. Just reassign her seat to economy. A beat of silence stretched. Then, clap. Clap, clap. Victoria clapped her hands together, her face lighting up with mock delight. Perfect solution, she chimed, turning toward the crew with sickening cheerfulness. No need to make a big deal out of this. Just escort her to her new seat, please. Naomi knew it wasn't a request. The young flight attendant, Olivia, hesitated for a fraction of a second. Her eyes betrayed a sliver of sympathy. But she stepped forward anyway. Naomi forced her shoulders back. She would not be led like a prisoner. Where? Her voice was steady, but inside, something cold and heavy settled in her chest. Victoria's smirk widened as if she had been waiting for that question. She took her time, letting the moment stretch, savoring every second. Then her voice dripped with feigned politeness. Rear row, right by the lavatories. A sharp exhale from someone nearby, a soft chuckle, quickly muffled. Naomi's stomach twisted. She should have expected this. Victoria wouldn't let her leave with even an ounce of dignity intact. She wanted Naomi reduced, diminished, shoved so far into the background that she disappeared altogether. The aisle stretched long before her, an endless walk of shame. She moved forward, feeling the weight of every gaze, every murmur, every unspoken confirmation that she deserved this treatment. The first-class passengers barely hid their amusement. Some pretended to be occupied with their screens or drinks, but their eyes flicked toward her, curious, entertained. Others made no effort to hide their satisfaction, their gazes full of silent judgment. Then, it happened. A sudden, sharp coldness spread across Naomi's chest. She flinched, her breath hitching as liquid soaked through the delicate fabric of her blouse. For a brief, disoriented second, she thought it was an accident. Then, she saw Victoria's face. The flight attendant tilted her head, eyes wide with faint innocence. Her fingers still hovered over the now empty glass on a tray table. Oh my, she gasped, one hand dramatically covering her mouth. I must have been careless. Silence fell, thick, suffocating. A single snicker came from somewhere behind her. Naomi's breath came slow and measured, her fingers twitched at her side. She knew exactly what this was. It wasn't clumsiness, it wasn't an accident. This was the final humiliation. Victoria plucked a napkin from a tray, extending it toward Naomi with an infuriatingly sweet smile. Here, she offered, her tone gentle, condescending. You might want to clean up before heading to your new seat. The moment stretched unbearably long. Naomi could feel the expectation hanging in the air, the waiting, the anticipation. Would she take the napkin? Would she lash out? Would she finally snap, proving to everyone that Victoria had been right about her all along? Slowly, Naomi straightened. She didn't reach for the napkin. She didn't wipe herself off. She didn't say a word. She simply turned and kept walking, ignoring the cold fabric clinging to her skin, ignoring the chuckles, ignoring the way her dignity dripped away with every step. She didn't stop until she reached the very last row, where her new seat awaited. It was exactly what she expected. Cramped between a restless toddler and the stale chemical stench of a lavatory, the constant murmur of flushing toilets filled the air, a reminder of how low she had been forced. Victoria had won, or at least, that's what she thought. Every smirk, every whisper, every dismissive glance, they had all reinforced what the passengers believed. She didn't belong here. But they were wrong. Naomi's fingers moved with calm, practiced ease as she reached into her bag. The smooth glass of her phone was cool against her palm. A single number, no name, no hesitation. She pressed call. The line connected immediately. It's me, she murmured. Her voice was steady, unwavering. Do it now. She ended the call and slipped the phone back into her bag. No theatrics. No movements that would draw attention, just a deep breath and a long, slow exhale. Then, the shift began. A sharp crackle cut through the cabin as the overhead intercom activated. The usual announcements were gone. Instead, a voice carried through the speakers, calm, direct, and absolute. Attention, crew. This is an urgent directive. All in-flight operations are to be immediately suspended until further notice. Stand by for direct communication from company headquarters. The cabin froze. Conversations halted mid-sentence. A businessman halfway through sipping his champagne paused, his glass hovering just below his lips. A woman scrolling through her tablet looked up, her brow furrowing. The flight attendants, trained for routine, now found themselves in completely unfamiliar territory. Then, Victoria's voice sliced through the silence. There was no warmth now, no condescension, just irritation, laced with the first hint of uncertainty. She reached for her radio, pressing the button with force. Operations, this is lead flight attendant Victoria Langley. Can you clarify? We're about to taxi. What's the meaning of this? Passengers shifted uncomfortably. A few leaned into the aisles, trying to gauge the reaction of the crew. Naomi remained perfectly still, her expression neutral, her hands resting lightly on her lap. Victoria pressed the button again, her tone sharper, more demanding. Operations, respond. Nothing. A thin crack appeared in Victoria's polished exterior. Her fingers clenched around the radio, her knuckles whitening. She turned toward the other flight attendants, expecting someone to fix this. But all she found were blank, confused stares. The tension thickened, stretching across the cabin like a storm rolling in. A passenger in first class finally broke the silence. His voice was edged with impatience. What's going on? Are we taking off or not? Victoria forced a tight smile. It barely concealed the fracture forming in her confidence. I'm sure it's just a minor miscommunication, she said smoothly. I'll get it sorted. She turned back toward the galley. But the stiffness in her movements betrayed her frustration. The intercom crackled again. The same voice returned. Calm, unyielding. Flight crew, remain in position. Further instructions will follow shortly. A new wave of unease rippled through the cabin. This wasn't routine. This wasn't a minor delay. Something was happening. And for the first time since this flight began, Victoria wasn't in control. Naomi blinked slowly. The faintest hint of a smirk ghosted over her lips. Victoria's heartbeat pounded in her ears, a dull, rhythmic thudding against the deafening silence of her radio. No response from operations. Nothing. This wasn't miscommunication. This was deliberate. Someone had cut her off. She pressed the button again, harder this time. Operations. This is lead flight attendant Victoria Langley. Respond immediately. Her voice, though controlled, carried an unmistakable edge of tension. She was no longer issuing orders. She was begging for control. Still, nothing. The passengers who had just moments ago been comfortably enjoying the spectacle of Naomi's public humiliation were now shifting in their seats. Their confidence in the power dynamic of this flight was suddenly shaken. Then, the final blow came. The intercom crackled once more, a voice followed. But it wasn't the captain, it wasn't operations, it was someone else entirely. And the words that followed sent a cold weight settling into Victoria's chest. Lead flight attendant Victoria Langley, please step forward immediately. The entire plane stilled. This wasn't normal protocol. No flight crew was ever called out publicly like this. Certainly not by name. Victoria's eyes darted toward the other flight attendants. She searched for an answer, for an explanation. But all she found were wide-eyed stares, mirroring the same silent horror crawling up her spine. Passengers glanced at one another. Confusion flickered across their faces. Murmurs rippled through the cabin. Even those who had enjoyed watching Victoria flex her authority now seemed uncertain. Victoria forced a tight, professional smile, but her muscles felt stiff, unnatural. Excuse me? Her voice was hollow as she turned away. She smoothed down her uniform out of habit. Her hands were suddenly clammy. This time, Victoria wasn't the one calling the shots. And for the first time, she knew it. Naomi didn't move, didn't speak. But Victoria felt her gaze burning into her back as she walked past. Each step toward the front of the aircraft felt heavier, like wading through thick, suffocating air. The distance wasn't far, but it stretched endlessly. The weight of the unknown pressed down on her. Then she turned the corner into the first-class galley and stopped cold. Standing just inside the jet bridge was a man she recognized instantly. A man whose presence made the captain standing beside him look small in comparison. Navy blue suit, crisp white shirt, a silver company pin glinting subtly on his lapel. The CEO. Victoria's stomach plummeted. For the first time in her career, she felt something close to real fear. His gaze was cold, unreadable, razor-sharp in its precision. But it wasn't just the fact that he was here. It was who stood beside him. Victoria's breath hitched. The realization struck her like a physical blow. The CEO's eyes didn't leave her as he spoke. His voice was quiet, too quiet, but it carried an undeniable weight. You just humiliated my daughter in front of an entire aircraft. The words slammed into Victoria with the force of a wrecking ball. Her throat tightened, her stomach twisted painfully. The world around her suddenly felt too small. The air, too thin. She opened her mouth, to deny, to explain, to say something, but her voice had abandoned her. Her chest tightened, her pulse a relentless hammering beneath her skin. The CEO's words rang in her ears, refusing to fade. My daughter. The realization settled like a stone in her stomach. This wasn't just any passenger. This was the wrong person to cross, the wrong battle to pick. In the cabin, first-class passengers leaned forward, their interest fully captured now. The murmur of voices spread through the aircraft, a slow-growing tide of whispered speculation. Victoria had spent the entire flight basking in their silent approval, their complicit amusement at her treatment of Naomi. But now they watched her downfall with the same fascination. The CEO stepped forward. His presence commanded the space effortlessly. When he spoke, his voice was calm, controlled, but absolute. Victoria Langley, as of this moment, you are terminated from your position at this airline. A collective gasp rippled through the cabin. Someone muttered, "Oh my God." A businessman in first class slowly lowered his glass, eyes wide. Even the flight attendants, who had stood frozen on the sidelines, looked stunned. Victoria felt the ground slipping beneath her. "Sir, please, The CEO raised a hand. The gesture cut her off effortlessly. "I have no interest in excuses." His gaze hardened. "I've reviewed the security footage. I've seen everything. The insults, the humiliation, the deliberate abuse of power. Your actions are indefensible." Victoria's throat dried. She turned, desperation creeping into her expression. "This is a misunderstanding." "Is it?" Naomi's voice, calm, razor-sharp. It cut through Victoria's panic like a blade. For the first time, Victoria truly looked at her, not as an inconvenience, not as someone beneath her, but as the one person in this room who held more power than she ever could. Victoria swallowed hard. "I was just following protocol." "You abused your authority," the CEO said without hesitation, "and you did it for one reason only." His voice lowered, lethal in its precision. "You thought no one would stop you." The weight of those words settled over the entire aircraft. The silence was suffocating. The CEO turned slightly, addressing the cabin crew. "Escort Miss Langley off this aircraft immediately." For the first time, Victoria wasn't the one giving orders. A uniformed officer stepped forward. "Ma'am, you need to come with us." The words rang final. Victoria froze, panic flaring in her chest. "Please, just..." The officer grasped her arm, firm, professional. She flinched, humiliated beyond measure, as she was led through the cabin like a criminal. As she passed the first-class passengers, the very people she had once entertained with her cruelty, she saw the shift in their expressions. No more amusement, no more silent approval, only judgment. A woman in designer sunglasses whispered to her husband, "She really thought she'd get away with that." Another passenger shook his head. "Unbelievable." Victoria's face burned. She was marched down the aisle, past the very seat where she had forced Naomi to sit in disgrace, past the other flight attendants who didn't dare meet her gaze. She reached the aircraft door, the final step. The moment she was removed, she knew her career was over. The doors hissed shut behind her. Inside the plane, the CEO turned to the remaining crew. His voice was steady. "I apologize for the delay. This flight may now resume." Passengers exhaled. The tension finally released. Naomi, still seated in economy, met her father's gaze. He nodded slightly. No words were needed. Justice had been served, and everyone on that plane would remember it. Justice has been served. Victoria Langley has finally paid the price for her arrogance. Do you think her punishment was deserved, or should it have been even harsher? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more epic turnarounds, shocking karma moments, and powerful life lessons. Have you ever witnessed an injustice like this in real life? If so, Share your story in the comments.